And thanks everyone for coming tonight. I know it was kind of a rainy night, MTA troubles and everything, so appreciate you making it. I just wanted to say a few words about the IAFE Technology Committee and what our aims are. We try, first of all, it's chaired by Debbie Williams and I, and what we aim to do is really bridge the gap between the IAFE community and the technology community by bringing together these groups in different forums on meetings that are hopefully very topical and interesting, and really focus on some of the key industry, some of the industry trends. And some of our recent events have been on algo trading, electronic trading platforms, reference data management, ASPs for risk management, grid computing, and XML FPML. And for today's event, obviously we're focusing on derivatives post-trade processing, which feels to me a little bit like watching the movie Groundhog Day, and it feels a little bit like going back to the 90s in terms of this topic. But it's interesting to see how timely this topic has become over the past 6 months, because that's about how long ago that Debbie and I started looking at this topic. And since then, it's actually become, incredibly top of mind for the industry, given the events. There have been a lot of red flags in the industry over the past few years. If you look back at the 2005 Fed, New York Fed action, and then more recently last year's ISDA reports throwing up red flags about this area. But despite the fact, when we hit market volatility back in July of last year, you look at just credit confirms, the non-confirmed trades went up over 100%. And the equity derivative space, the situation is even worse. And so despite all the writing on the wall and this fact this is not a new topic, we find ourselves in a situation we are today. And I'm sure that many of us in the room today working in the ops area have been working overtime for the past 6 months just trying to keep on top of the situation. And I don't think by any means we're through it in terms of market volatility. So it's become incredibly important. And some of the topics we're going to look at today are whether or not this situation represents a systemic risk. Does this situation provide more opportunities for rogue traders, et cetera, et cetera? So we'll go deeply into these questions with the panel that we have. And I'd like to first introduce our moderator, Debbie Williams, who had a long career previously working in the financial analysis world, where she started Meridian Research and worked at IDC Financial Insights for a long time, and then jumped on the other side of the game and now works aggressively jumped, and has been working at Citizens Bank. And I will also like to thank Goldman Sachs for very graciously hosting us. Goldman has a great history of supporting the IFE, which we really deeply appreciate. One thing we didn't mention in terms of housekeeping is that we will be having a cocktail reception punctually at 7:30, right next door. So hopefully you can stay and join us for that. And without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Debbie, and thank you again very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Mac. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Let me talk a little bit about our format tonight, just to give you a sense of how the evening will progress, and then we'll try and dive into the topic. And I think this is more or less the format we use at most of our technology events. What we found works fairly well is we have a bunch of questions that we've discussed amongst the panelists and given some thought to, the highlights of which you will see on your program. And then we like to get the audience involved, so I would love it if folks raise their hand or wink or nod or something and catch my attention, and I'll call on you. You can ask questions directly. We will certainly take questions throughout, and I will also save some time at the end in case something comes up that you haven't thought of. We are in a PowerPoint-free zone, you'll notice. So I hope that, I know from my perspective, I have to say I just see far too many PowerPoint slides during the day, so I always feel like when we're going to come out of the evening, the last thing we need is another PowerPoint. So apologies for not having handouts, but hopefully this will make the evening a little bit more interactive and will cause you not to have quite that same glazed over look in your eyes from staring at too many PowerPoint slides. So that's more or less the format. And I'm feeling short, I'm sorry. What I have asked all of the panelists to do is to just give a couple minutes on their background, because I think it's important that everybody understands the perspectives. We have three very different perspectives on the panel tonight. Hopefully that will give us a nice, broad perspective on the issues. And then I asked them to come up with a response to the following, and that was, what one piece of advice would you give to the industry overall in terms of how to address the issues? Because as Max said, I think anybody that's been around the industry for a while will recognize this particular issue as being sort of a perennial one. It changes its spots a little bit, but not much. When I was working in trading automation, when I first joined Citibank, I won't even say when, but it was the late 80s. This was still an issue. We solved it in a slightly different way, but it was still an issue, and seems to have come back. Like almost every decade, we reinvigorate it. So my thought was, we have three very experienced folks up here, that we would ask them what advice they would give to those of us that are out there still struggling with this problem. So I'm going to stop talking for a while, and I'm going to turn it over to John to start. We could just go right down the line, John.
All right, I'm John Avery. I'm a partner in the SunGard Consulting Services Financial Services Technology practice. We were actually an acquisition about 10 months ago, and prior to that, we were a small boutique development firm focused on agile development on Wall Street. And for the past 10 years, I've been involved in a number of custom development projects on both the sell side and the buy side, in the front, middle, and back office. So the perspective I bring to things is really around what types of applications need to be built, and how they're built, and how teams are organized to build those types of applications to solve the problems that affect the front, middle, and back office across those organizations. To answer Debbie's challenge, the one piece of advice I've had for the industry is really the fact that operations, will always be a cost center, right? And because of that, you're always going to be up against budget constraints in terms of what you can do. Clearly, a lot of the spending and a lot of the thought process that goes around choosing what technology projects and what technology to implement is reactionary. And I think the key thing is that you do have a number of choices to make there. And my only advice would be to not only focus on what you're building, but also how you're building it. For example, just in terms of the sequence in which you deliver features and functionality, and this is applicable whether you're buying or building systems or a hybrid combination of both. But also in how you organize your technology organization, around the back office, and how you can build organizations to respond to changes, rapidly respond to changes in the marketplace. And we all know that the back office is sure, there's always a stressful event that really defines each year, right? And the key thing is being nimble enough to respond to those changes within the constraints, the budgetary constraints that are imposed in the back office.
Great, thanks. Chip.
Sure. My name is Chip Carver. I'm currently the CEO of SwapsWire. We're in the process of becoming part of Market Partners, and I'll be continuing there, working and managing the processing business within Market Partners. Prior to that, I worked at Goldman Sachs, actually, for about 12 years, mostly running a trading desk and OTC derivatives on the fixed income side here in New York. So it's good to be back home in some sense. I think one of the things that when you ask what's the one piece of advice I would give to you, and I'm going to break it up into two things, but basically my view is that you need to get on with it. It may be somewhat self-serving given that I'm a vendor in this space in terms of people automating confirmations, et cetera, but we still meet with some resistance of people saying, well, I don't know who to choose, I don't know which to go with. I can tell you right now that if you haven't chosen, you haven't gone with anybody, you're at a competitive disadvantage, and therefore you need to make a choice and get on with it. The second is that for those people that have gotten on with it, and we've certainly been up and running for about 5 years now, almost 6, those people, I think, actually need to take a step back, and they need to analyze and look at the different alternatives that still exist in the marketplace and say, am I doing the right one? Have I chosen the right path? You may have chosen a path that was correct because it got you to a certain level and a certain goal early on. But now I think it's actually the point at which you should take a step back and say, is this the right place for me to be? Is this the right market solution out there for me to basically advance my business? Because I do think there are some choices out there, and they make stark differences in terms of the process that we're asking you to do, whether it's SwapSwire or DTCC or T0, all the other providers of services out there. You need to really ask yourself which one works. And also related to that, I'd say that it's not going to be perfect. As much as I'd like to stand up here and say I'm going to solve all of your individual problems and I'm going to do it the best I can and I'll do it with a smile on my face and yes, I'll meet exactly your need, et cetera, we all know from a technology perspective we're not going to get there. So you actually need to make a little bit of a compromise at times to adjust your process. So that you can become more efficient, because everything that we're talking about in the back office related especially to confirmations, but even if you look at settlements, collateral, et cetera, anything really in the OTC world, it's a community. It'd be great if I had the best system in the world and one person used it. It's not going to get anything done. And we've certainly experienced this as our product has grown, and now that we have almost every dealer on in terms of the fixed income market, in interest rate derivatives, and in terms of the number of people that we have on the buy side, every day our volumes, frankly, are growing because the community effect takes hold. The only way that actually works is we will try and be as flexible as we can in our platform. But I think that the users also need to be a little bit accommodative and understand that they might have to change their process a little bit as well.
I'm Kevin McPartland. I'm a senior analyst with Tab Group. We're a research and advisory firm focusing solely on the capital markets. I focus primarily in the derivative space and on technology as well. Just to give you an idea of the type of research that we do, I recently finished up a report on buy-side usage of listed options trading. We've also looked at low latency messaging and its effect on trading, and also just finishing up some work on OTC derivatives processing tools. So very timely for this session tonight. As to the question, I think when it comes to technology spend and focus, the front office always seems to get all of the attention. Everybody looks at the high-speed data and algorithms and kind of thinks that this is where all the fun is and where all the focus should be put. But OTC derivatives is obviously showing something different. And although trade capture of complex derivatives has a whole set of its own problems and concerns, I think we really need to realize that going back to what John said, we need to really be proactive in the back office and not wait for something to go wrong or for an audit to come back and say that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing before we tackle those problems. And there's a lot of really crucial business problems that need to get solved, and some really cool technology that's out there now to help solve those. So finding it, integrating it, coming up with what are the best of breed solutions for each firm will be crucial, and it's something that should be focused on now rather than waiting for the next blow up or rogue trader or whatever news story that you pick.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So the first topic that we had, I hope everyone was. Nobody's taking notes. All that great advice. There's going to be a quiz later. The first topic that we had talked a little bit about, and it's a little bit to set the stage. Show of hands, how many are directly involved today in a derivatives back office? How many people in the audience? So the rest of you are just scared about what they're doing every day in the back office. Excellent. Okay. So I just thought we would set the stage in terms of what some of the challenges are, and feel free to chime in. Those of you that raised your hands, that Mac was supposed to explain the Sisyphus reference for those of you in the audience that didn't quite get that. I think the allusion was to the fact that we seem to keep at this problem and never make any progress. Is that what the idea was? So I thought maybe we would talk a little bit about why not. I mean, it was alluded to a little bit by way of the opening remarks for the panelists, but it seems to me the front office, back office problem persists. The back office never seems to catch up with the front office. It seems by now to me we should have accepted the fact that Excel's not going away, and we should have a back office capable of coping with whatever comes out of that Excel spreadsheet in the front office. I'm I know as I've moved more and more into the risk management space and looked a little bit more at some of the operational risk techniques, you would think that some of the current efforts there would have forced us to come up with better controls for that trade-off from the spreadsheet to the back office. We're not there. Why not? What is causing the back office to not catch up? And in your views, guys, are we making any progress on a straight-through process, the illusory straight-through process? Chip, you smiled, so you want to tackle that?
God, I hope so. Otherwise, I got to tell my kids I want to do at work, and I'm not sure what it is. I think I have a somewhat of a unique perspective. My career actually started at Citibank, probably about the same time as you did. And then I went to Goldman Sachs. And at the time I went to Goldman, they actually didn't have an OTC derivative book. So in a unique experience, we actually started not only the front office, the trading aspects, but we also got the credit guy reported to us, the legal guy reported to us, and the back office reported to us. They were all together. Now, you'd never do that today in any place, right? You can think of all the bad things that can happen. But we were really charged with basically developing the whole business. So we thought about a lot of this stuff. But strangely, every time I did a trade, the way that I communicated it to the back office, and I'm not joking, is I literally wrote it down on a piece of paper, I gobbled it up, and I threw it to a guy who sat on the other side. Now, that was very effective, right? And why was it effective? And this is a key, and actually is what SwapSwire does today. And the key is that the guy who knows the trade is the guy who did the trade. The further we move it away from that, the more problems you have. And I think some of the automation solutions try and move it away. And what we did very early on at SwapSwire is we said, you know what, if we go to the back office, we're going to face the problems exactly as she's identified. Where's the budget going to come from? Why are we going to get some focus? Why is anyone going to care? What does it mean? Who are we going to convince? But if you convince the front office that they have some benefit, and I'm not just talking about risk reduction, but I'm talking about the ease with which you can capture those trades and what I would call, and ultimately we actually marketed it this way, was giving them back their afternoon. You go, what do you mean by that? And you go, well, what do you do at 3 o'clock today? What do you mean? I go, what's going to happen at 3 o'clock today? I can tell you what's going to happen is the guy from the middle office is going to walk up to you, Mr. Trader, and he's going to go, you remember that trade you did 4 days ago? Is it London and New York or just London holidays? Now, if you've had a good day trading, you might actually respond to him. If you've had a bad day, that guy's got to be ready to run, right? Yeah, he's got to be able to run away. But if I take the process and I give it to the guy who knows the trade and I reduce a lot of the translation risk, suddenly it becomes a front office issue. It's a much more difficult process and it's a much longer thing to get you there because you have to get all the traders to buy into it, and that's what we spent all our time doing. But once you've got them, it's tough to turn it and slide it away. So I think we have made a lot of progress. We touch about 200,000 trades a month now. Most of our trades that get confirmed and trade date. 99% of them on the dealer-to-dealer side, and somewhere around 80% on the dealer-to-buy side. That is, in my view, is huge progress. If you look at somebody like DTCC, I don't think the CDS market could nearly be as big as it is today if they hadn't made the progress they'd made. So when you ask the question, have we made any progress? Have we gotten any place? Are we asking the same questions? We might be asking the same questions because we're refining what the answers are, but I think the progress has been absolutely dramatic. We wouldn't be in the place where we are today. We wouldn't be having the volumes we have today unless we'd been able to achieve some of the things we had from a technology standpoint and from an STP standpoint.
I'm going to take the Excel question. As long as I've been working in financial technology, every time a trader did something good in Excel, immediately IT needed to figure out how to integrate it into their enterprise system. Excel we shouldn't use it. Nothing critical should happen in Excel. We need to get rid of it. I think finally we're starting to accept the fact that Excel's not going away, that we need it, that creating a system that's flexible enough to create structured products is so complex. Half the time these systems, all they're doing is recreating a spreadsheet interface within their applications. So it sort of seems like why go through all the trouble. So there actually has been a lot of progress, I think, in dealing with Excel and managing Excel, and people are starting to see that it should be, it should be accepted, and we should figure out how to work with it. And there's a number of companies, Cluster 7 and CompassSoft come to the top of my mind, that work to help you audit spreadsheets, to watch, to monitor them, to make sure that if financial models are embedded into macros, that if a trader changes them or if a cell is overwritten by accident, that all of these things can be caught and flagged in real time and whoever cares can be alerted. So I think there's been a lot of progress in that regard. And then if we actually go back to Microsoft, obviously, who wants to, they're more than happy for everybody to keep trading with Excel. Microsoft in their newer versions have started to really try to show that this can be enterprise. They let you run Excel spreadsheets off of the server rather than on the local PC. The base of the files for the new version of Excel are actually XML based. Of course, Microsoft compresses them and does their own thing with them, but essentially it's XML underneath. So being able to take those Excel files that traders create, turn them into XML, which will be much more easy now, and let back office systems suck in XML, then maybe we do have a real way to send Excel-based trades down to the back office and let them be processed automatically. So, yeah, I mean, we absolutely have made progress. We were talking about this earlier. Is even though maybe 80% of vanilla CDSs and interest rate swap trades are done through SwapsWire or DerivServe, that still leaves thousands and thousands of trades.
The ones that got away, huh?
Yeah, exactly. There's still thousands and thousands of even vanilla trades that are done with paper and faxes, and there's somebody standing at the fax machine waiting for the paper to come out so they can sign it and fax it back. So we've made great progress, but there definitely is still some way to go. And the technology exists; it just needs to be found and implemented in the right way, and the time taken to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen, and we've stayed pretty active on both the sell side and the buy side from a consulting standpoint in development projects that really are focused on getting the back office caught up to where the front office is, just in terms of being able to support the latest and greatest products. And to some degree, the back office will always be in a catch-up game, right? Because I think the derivatives are not getting less complex, and the market itself is very innovative. The products themselves are getting are complex to the point where to Kevin's point about Excel really is the best user interface to capture these trades because every trade is or it can conceivably be very different, and at the end of the day, some of the opportunities that exist in the back office around document management solutions, et cetera, are a lot less structured than just plain vanilla cash or listed option trade capture. So representing the trades, I mean, I think clearly FPML has brought us a lot further than we had been. But at the end of the day, the confirmations process, for one, is essentially a document management function, right? And with some additional supporting data. And I think clearly document management functions and systems have brought the back office a long way. And I think in the future, probably in the next year to 2 years, we're going to see a lot more in the business process management and workflow space of the application of those technologies to sort of glue together the disparate functions and technology applications that probably pepper and are spread among the back office. I think another one of the most challenging aspects of back office technology, which are and Chip may agree or disagree with this one.
You can always move over a seat if you need to.
Is clearly the number of opportunities and options that you have in terms of integration from an OTC trade post-derivative or post-trade processing standpoint. SwapsWire being one of them. For those of the folks in the energy derivatives business, clearly you have NYMEX, you have Clearport, you have ICE with econ firms. So we've been involved in a number of situations where we've seen particularly energy firms or people in the energy derivatives business just swamped with a number of integration points that they end up having, from a budgetary standpoint, end up having to pick one to integrate with in any particular budget season, and that's which one do you pick? So I think as the trades get more complex and the deals get more complex, you'll see a portion of the market move to push the vanilla instruments or the instruments where you're really getting volume, pushing those to the processing platforms that can support them. But at the end of the day, the front office is making money on the deals that are exotic and that are interesting, and to some degree, one could argue that the reason they are so profitable is because the desk on the street with the operations department that can handle it, whether that's from a technology standpoint or whether they just handle it with lots of bodies, they're the ones that can process those trades and scale their business. So I think it's the back office will always be interesting, and I think we're going to be having the same conversation in another 10 years.
See, Mac, we don't have to come up with a new topic. Thanks, guys. I guess listening to you, I was struck by a couple of things. First of all, it sounds like the opportunities to automate are out there. We can control Excel. We have tools like SwapWire. We have all the technologies that you've just listed, John, and frankly, none of them are new. Document management, business process, management workflow. Those tools have been around for at least the last 5 or 6 years. I still hear there's a large chunk of relatively simple trades that aren't automated yet. Couple questions. First of all, why the hell not? Like, why haven't we gotten to it? Is it a funding question? The second question is the one that we put on the sheet, which is, does the inability to do this actually leave us open to rogue traders? Is it creating risk within our individual institutions? Is it creating a systemic risk? Do you buy that premise? Is it just a cost of doing business? I've heard that many times in institutions I've worked with and in institutions I've advised. They say, well, geez, we got most of it down and we're making lots of money on the other trades, so it doesn't really matter. What's wrong with the picture today?
So there's a lot of technology out there. I think maybe part of the problem is it's definitely still not a one-stop shopping environment. You can't just set up your hedge fund, decide you're going to start trading exotic OTC derivatives and pick, vendor A, and they'll give you everything you need. There's systems for confirmations, there's systems for settlement, affirmation, document management, workflow management. There's starting to be some, I think, mergers and acquisitions. Market and SwapWire is a good example. DerivServ kind of linking up with with CLS. And then from the vendor side, you've got Document Sciences is linked up with EMC. So I think a lot of firms are starting to come together to create that full package or that suite that's really going to help you do an end-to-end process and make it a little bit simpler. But still, especially from a bulge bracket perspective, they're still doing best of breed. And to do a best of breed solution with so many components takes a lot of people, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of money to really figure that out. Even for the firms that do a lot of in-house development, they're still picking and choosing bits that they can buy off the shelf. So maybe they build their settlement system themselves, but they use SharePoint to do workflow management. So those decisions aren't simple, and they're different for every situation. So it's I think that's really holding people back because they just don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I would basically say that I think you've probably seen this in other technology adventures or ventures. Competition is not necessarily a bad thing in this space. It certainly has made us better because we're competing with other providers of services. We've had to pay attention to it. We've had to be responsive. So it's a very good thing. There is a limit, though, and there is a point in the cycle of development of these things, and we might be very close to that, where that competition isn't necessarily yielding as much as it's creating pain. And part of the reason that I was attracted to the linking up with Market was because it was linking up with an institution and processing business that had a lot of features that we didn't necessarily have. And also sitting and talking to them, realizing that in very short order, they would be developing a lot of things that we had already developed, and we would be developing a lot of things they had already developed. And so wouldn't we be able to short-circuit that and perhaps put ourselves in a prominent position if we could make that combination work? And I think that there will be more of this consolidation, either through attrition or through M&A activity as we go forward. And I think this is a natural progression of what takes place in these systems and in this processing space. I think it's just a natural place for the market to go, frankly.
I'm going to sort of talk to the systemic risk portion of that question.
I was surprised nobody picked that up yet.
And we definitely, we saw a lot of concern about just systemic risk in general back in 2006 and even in 2005. Clearly, there was a lot of regulatory chatter around the hedge fund space, and clearly, the concerns in in that space, and the events.
Did we solve that problem, John? Because I missed that.
Yeah. Thankfully, it went away for a little bit, and I guess obviously part of that was some of the things we saw in the futures market in August and September of 2006. But from a systemic risk standpoint, I guess it really comes down to how you define systemic risk and whether or not the market can absorb an event that would really that would test the market itself. Right, and I think what Chip had mentioned. Really, there are a number of choices in who you go with and who you deal with in terms of sort of the multilateral processing platforms. And ultimately, from a systemic risk standpoint, I think it really you run into the issues, and I don't think we've had an event yet where we've really seen enough concentration in any one particular deal type. I think the confirmation backlogs of the past couple of years. I'm not sure if they've really tested the market to the point where that people or should be concerned enough to really justify a vastly increased spend on the operational side of things. So, I'm not sure if that really answers the question, but
so you're not buying the systemic risk.
No,
is what I'm hearing.
No.
Not buying it. Kevin, are we buying it?
Well, the banks did a great job of cleaning up those backlogs. I think in a lot of cases they improved processes a little, but they mostly threw bodies at the problem and just brought in people to help clean up the backlogs and get the numbers down in time for what the Fed told them to do. Then we had all the mess in August and everything else through the end of the year, and the backlogs climbed right back up. That's sort of proof that they did throw bodies at the problem, and the processes didn't really improve as much as everyone would have hoped. So,
but the thing didn't crash.
They held up, but we're sort of back where we. I don't know if we go so far to say we're back where we started, but the same problem still exists. Like you said, why do these problems keep coming back? We're not really solving them; we're band-aiding them, and sort of as long as things go good. From what I've read about SocGen, no one noticed when he was up. But all of a sudden, when the positions went down, that was when everybody stood up and noticed. That goes right back to the being proactive instead of reactive.
There's clearly two sides to every trade, right? And I think the bigger concern of August of this past year was in valuations, right? And I think that clearly the bigger systemic risk is in marking your trades to a model, and not to market, not necessarily on the operational side of things.
So
you
can throw bodies. It's the models.
Yeah, you could throw bodies at the problem, and as Kevin mentioned, we've seen it work. It's not ideal, and it does it when you spend a lot of money on bodies over time, it can clearly erode profitability. Right. But at the same time, you can survive under that model for a long time.
I also think that one of your worst days as a trader is when you're sitting there and you've lost money because of a booking error, and you go back and look at it and you realize. I can see what happened. I understand what happened, and we're down $2 million. And what am I going to do? There's just no way out. There's no one to blame. There's nothing. And it really, you look at it. If you take a big step back, it is the system. How come somebody didn't check it? Yeah. Well, now there is somebody to blame because you probably didn't help authorize to go and spend the money, so you can blame yourself. But in a long-term perspective, you want to get rid of those errors. If there's a rogue trader out there and he wants to do something, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to be able to prevent it. It's just going to happen. I'd say your best way to prevent it is through your interviewing process, frankly. If that's your goal, you're going to stymie the market, frankly. But if you can eliminate those types of trades that just suck resources out, I think that's extremely important to give people comfort. And I'd say the other thing is that people say that they won't invest in this because they're not sure of what the benefits are. I'm pretty sure certainly every major dealer I've talked to in terms of the cost per trade. It's significantly less when they've automated. Significantly less when they've automated trades. Now, that may not be true in a smaller shop where you can't necessarily move a person over to do some other job, but certainly their volumes can go up and they can be less restricted by volume constraints because of their size. So I would argue that there's this direct economic need to go ahead and move into these systems and use them. Automation does improve the process in terms of your cost. And on top of that, by the way, you probably don't have any more of those errors. We've certainly had situations where we've walked into clients and they said, oh, we don't have errors. And you go, okay, well.
No risk either.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just amazing. But so I think you can take care of both, but don't hope to get rid of all and every problem.
So in your experience, Chip, how many firms actually have a sense of what their cost per trade is for these kinds of errors?
Oh, for the errors, I think they've gotten pretty good at it because, I mean, one of the things you also note is that it's an error when it's against you. It was great trading when it's for you. So I think they've done a good job of tracking those and done a better job of making sure they understand those because by definition it should be a zero-sum game, right? But you know that you're gonna mostly lose in those situations. So I think the larger firms certainly have done a good job of tracking those, and I think they've also done a very good job of understanding what their cost is for using various systems. And I think they're actually generally willing to share that with their clients as well and give them their experiences, which I think is a valuable thing for people that haven't jumped into the automation as fully as they could. I think the banks are more than anxious to do that because I think the story tells people to do it, and we're back to the community effect for the dealers. That helps them out. So,
do those costs per trade, I guess I'm asking a question now, do those costs
That's
per
okay.
trade include the upfront development and implementation costs, or is it after that's all said and done, we can ignore that $10 million, and now what is the cost per trade?
no, it's factoring in their ongoing cost of what does it take to process those trades going forward. And I think they're also looking at, as my volumes increase, I really don't have a choice between not automating and automating. I have to automate or I can't survive.
Right.
And then what is my ongoing cost of maintaining those various approaches?
I'm kind of curious, all you out there working at all these larger firms, how many of you feel like your firms have a pretty good idea of what these kinds of errors cost you on a per trade basis? Show of hands, that people that think they do know.
Misbook trade,
Yeah.
buy, sell,
Sorry, did you hear that?
size is wrong.
Yeah. Problem with the processing of the trade, so it doesn't settle properly. Anybody? Oh, there's one. I don't know, Chip. I haven't been in the derivatives back office in a while, but I'm thinking that people that do know are the ones that are more likely to be investing in the automation, because the reason you create that business case is because you want to spend some money and need someone to open up the checkbook. But I mean, I would bet that most of the firms that are not investing in those kinds of automation are not also aware of the cost.
Well, I can certainly remember the trades and the days when we had these.
Right.
They're in, and this was, 10 years ago. I can tell you exactly what happened and what the case was and how it happened and who it was.
But you're never going to do that again, I think, is the rationale. Ah, geez, I screwed that up. I should have written an 8, and it wasn't, my 8s aren't very clear or whatever. I should have typed it in, or I shouldn't have, and then I'm not going to do that anymore, so it's not a risk.
I
No?
don't think you can actually control that unless you alter the process, would be my argument.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think what's interesting to note about this is that it's not systemic risk that's going to drive investment in back office technology and processing. It's really going to be operational cost reduction, right? And I think that's the significant point here. Whether or not you can or can't measure it, I think the automation platforms clearly allow you to at least get to a point where you can have some attempt at measuring and have the metrics that you need to at least assess where you are. But clearly, I don't think systemic risk is really going to be, the situation that really gets us to see that massive level of investment in ops
I totally agree,
technology.
because I think the systemic risk, what that does is it drives a regulator to tell you have to do something that causes a short-term investment. Short-term investment's passed, you check the box, you move on. It's some sense of what the cost is on an ongoing basis that causes the long-term investment. And if you think back to what Kevin was saying earlier in terms of the requirement, at least today, still to invest in multiple systems and then stitch them together and monitor those processes, that's a long-term investment. That's not I bought one, I put it in, I'm done kind of effort. I haven't heard anything out there from the audience. You guys still awake? Do you have any questions? There's a question in the back. I have lots more, but
Okay, we have a client who's for in some cases making a business case post hoc, but being in the middle office, we've run into the budgetary black wall issue. And one of the things that you said that was interesting earlier in the conversation was that you use Excel as a prototyping engine. So as a result of this prototyping process, do you end up with a train
So is the question whether the process that you use via Excel gets you to a point that there's something that's automatable, or whether it's always a one-off kind of event?
Exactly, and I'm coming and I tie the budgetary thing back in because then from a middle office perspective, we could sort of tap into the budget cycle more as it relates to
Right. So if it's not a one-off event, you'd be able to budget for it. So that would make it a better thing, a good thing.
So, okay, just trying to think where to start. I think probably the most automatable part would be the ability to send data downstream from Excel, right? I think that's probably the quickest thing that can be done. Stepping back, I've definitely seen Excel turned into some pretty ridiculously complicated, basically CDS booking applications with so many tabs and screens and user interfaces that you wouldn't even know it was Excel if you didn't know any better. So what's out there now to make that manageable and in theory enterprise are these systems that let you really track and audit. I think some of the biggest problems. So I was at the time acting as a project manager in IT where a lot of the development was in these Excel spreadsheets. The biggest problem that the IT guys had and the developers had was the traders would, create a copy of the file and change it a little bit because it was annoying. Whatever part of it was annoying to them, and then, now version control is a mess, and we can't, maybe if they're changing something critical or some way that trades are valued, or the way that they package the data to send it downstream, then we've got a big mess. So what a lot of these new products, these auditing type products are doing is allowing ways to stop that, essentially. It's passively monitoring the sheets that are running wherever they're running to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, then someone can be alerted and the issue can be addressed quickly. I think the passive monitoring is an important aspect there as well. Traders, at least in my own experience, are not going to want to feel like Big Brother's watching them the whole time. You're not going to put some big thing in their Excel that if they try to change a field in their Excel file, it's going to say you can't do that because that takes the flexibility of Excel and throws it right out. So not stopping them from doing it, but making sure that people are notified and what they are changing is tracked and manage to cut that risk.
It sounds like what you're saying, Kevin, to address the question is that essentially what you're doing is you're making Excel a little bit less dangerous, but not necessarily making Excel something that you could easily build into an application.
Because if you take too much of the danger away, then Excel loses a lot of its value. So you need to still let there be some freedom, but...
What's interesting, Chip noted before, what was it was 200,000 interest rate swaps open on a monthly basis? Interest rate swaps probably started off as Lotus, on Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheets, right? Given when the market really started. And I think that it's interesting, and to Kevin's point as well, you can't take away the trader's ability to, create the exotic deals in Excel, right? And there's some fine threshold or some continuum where there's a point of inflection where you realize it's unmanageable in Excel. And I think it's at that point that the market, in whatever you're dealing in, the market's big enough to justify an investment in a more structured system to do deal capture and then to push those trades downstream in a structured way, right? And the interest rate swap example being, at some point over the evolution of the interest rate swap market, FPML was conceived, right? And the deal capture platforms really, can all support basic vanilla interest rate swaps very, very easily now. But that wasn't always the case. So I think there's clearly there's an evolutionary model, even for proprietary development internally, where from a technology perspective, whether you're in the front or middle office, you need to be ready to pull the trigger on a project or on an initiative to really move away from Excel to a more structured capture platform. But it's at that point where there are enough business dollars and there's enough volume to justify that investment. And until that, and there's always going to be there's always going to be a trader creating some kind of really exotic deal in a spreadsheet somewhere that you're always going to need to support that sort of offline processing model.
Thanks, guys. Another question back, yeah.
Question is slightly a bit of variation of what we were talking about, but in terms of the back office, the process
Okay, so if I understand the question, it was, can you buy this? There's people out there offering to sell us total front to back. That would seem to solve the problem. Can I just sign up for one somewhere? I think the answer is no, I'm sorry to say. But what do you guys think?
It really, you need to caveat that question with what types of products are you talking about, right? And whether you're thinking of it from a sell side perspective or a buy side perspective, right? Because we've seen, a lot of the hedge funds focused on cash instruments. Their operations department, sees a flood of exotic deals, and maybe not non-exotic deals. Just they get their first commodity derivative, and they start to explore. And we've seen the sell side, in 2008, really start to have a lot of interest in physically settled commodity derivatives. And for folks that are used to dealing in the financial space and financially settled instruments, it's a huge change. So I think it really depends. The answer to your question depends on the product or products that you're dealing in.
Well, I think it's probably not ever as simple as marketing might make it sound. You could take, for example, I guess I shouldn't use actual companies, but if you take a document management company with a sort of workflow management and storage company that have a joint venture.
You can use actual companies, Kevin. It's okay. I don't think, is anybody going to mind if he names the actual companies he's talking about?
There are many examples, so I don't want to single anyone out. But if you then take those products that have a joint venture and slap a management consulting company on top to do your implementation, well, then, of course, they can say, yes, we can provide you an end-to-end solution. But we know that takes months and people and a lot of money. So can you buy it? Yeah, I mean, you can, but it's not like installing Office on your PC. It's a several-month process with lots of probably work with internal business analysis and figuring out what makes sense for the given firm. But to that point, I think the smaller hedge fund market and a lot of these firms are starting to focus on that and the buy side and the needs of the buy side, and that's going to open up a whole new segment where they may be able to start to package this a little bit better for small, not for Goldman Sachs, but for a hedge fund with 20 people that wants to do some CDSs. They'll be able to help them do that more quickly and efficiently than they could have 5 years ago.
I think it's not only the product, as you say, that's important. It's what piece of functionality are you trying to deal with? What is it? Is it prime brokerage? Is it just the simple day one confirmation? Is it the amendment that takes place afterwards? Is it the position management? Is it dropping it into my ledger? What are you trying to automate? And once you define that function, then I think it becomes relevant as to whether that function is something that is internal to your institution. And I'd argue that's much easier to do sort of on a one-off and pick the features you love and make it all work for you. As soon as it starts to involve the community, it gets to be a little bit of a different question. That's where I think you're back to where I started, which is you might have to make some compromises. Because, by the way, if everybody decided to play over there, but you really think that one's good, tough luck. You better start to figure out how to play over there. And the market, I think, in some products is moving towards that. Certainly, I think in interest rates it has, in CDS it has, equities it's up in the air right now. I'd like to think it's headed towards us, but I'll be honest and say there's difference of opinions, but we're fighting over that right now. So I think it really depends. Is it features, product? Pick it out, and then you decide. And then I think we'd probably all come up with a pretty defined answer of what we think is best. And oh, by the way, if we put 5 people up here, you'd get 5 answers. Unfortunately or fortunately. I mean, that's not a bad thing, I don't think.
So the answer is not no, but it's sort of, it depends.
Yeah, there's not one right answer, I don't
The answer is sort of.
Sort of, maybe, kind of. Sorry. Stay tuned. Yes.
One aspect that I haven't heard tonight, that I was kind of surprised that I didn't hear,
Yeah.
is let's say, in the broker-dealer space. Within that broker-dealer space, there was mention of outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
But in that outsourcing, there tends to be 2 completely different flavors that at times clash. One is called retail, the other is called institutional.
Mm-hmm.
Definitions vary to the point when one outsourcing system gets supplanted by another outsourcing system. Let's just say the standard financial world is
groups.
But nevertheless, this was on the, this was supposedly the collection of individuals that were in fact providing this service outside the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet wouldn't have allowed this to happen. And in fact, at worst, it would have duplicated the previous, let's say, outsourced system. So my question is, I just mentioned one clash I saw. What are some of the most incredible clashes you've seen? In some cases, sunk a company. In other cases, they survived.
So the question is, based on the various different, I'm probably not going to do this right, trying to summarize all of that. Hopefully all of you were able to hear it. But for our listeners at home, what are some of the bigger instances where we have seen dramatic problems as a result of bringing something in-house, which was either the result of a combination of clashing technologies, or was the result of somebody bringing something in that wasn't necessarily intended to do what they had expected, more or less? Close enough? Oh, okay. Excellent. I'll just make them up then. Anybody want to tackle that? I'm guessing we won't get any of these guys to talk about the biggest disasters they've ever seen. Well, Chip might.
I can tell. Well,
Chip might.
I don't know if it's a big disaster, but this was way back in my Citibank days, and we put in a new bond system, and it was literally calculating the settlement amount incorrectly. And the guy stood up, and this was my first, and they took all the trainees, right? And we all went in a room, and they said, if it's over $1,500, just write it off and move on. And you sit there and you go, okay, it seems like a lot of money.
Happen again.
Oh, no, either way, it didn't matter. Just get rid of it. It's just got to go. We're wrong. Just move on. Just got to move on. You got to settle them up. And it would literally, no beta test, right? So I think it's about planning, but I think one of the things is if you're implying, it's almost a fatalistic implication that if you change, you're doomed, is kind of what I'm feeling, or you're saying, that, why go towards this because you're going to only run into more problems, and here's tried and true, so we'll never make an advancement. I remember reading a study about fixing the highways. And because of all the backups you cause, you actually net never get any benefit until you're out like 10 years. Well, my God, what will we be back to the buggies? I mean, you can do it, but I think you got to move on. You got to take the leap, and you know what? Some of them won't work. I'll say that. So, I mean,
I think you described the highway application was fascinating. We can move up to Boston for a second.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm from Boston.
So was I. The Red Sox.
You can drive through the city again.
Okay, the Southeast Expressway was built with certain definitions. These definitions were such that the roadbed was a certain depth, and on and on and on. Something like 40 years later, they found out that really wasn't the case. They then proceeded to replace this with another highway, which the entire world has heard about. It's called the Big Dig.
Yep.
Okay, we now have two examples where gigantic technology came in, and pretty much it sort of solved some things, but there are such holes that it's going to take yet the next technology.
But I'll respond to that one, guys, and then you can jump in after me. But my sense is, and this was mentioned earlier with regard to the rogue traders, that the answer to the question you pose is you really have to be careful who you hire to do that job for you. And you have to be very clear what your expectations are and what controls you put around the process. I can speak for the Big Dig. I can speak from many technology projects I have watched go under. If you start, for example, trying to boil the ocean or trying to dig all the way under the city of Boston in one fell swoop, and you don't hire the right people, or you hire the people that your brother and sister baby with the bathwater in some ways. the problem was with the process, not necessarily with the idea of what was solving it.
As soon as you have control of that.
Yes, and if you don't, maybe you'd best go back to the buggy.
I think that's something that's come a long way, just talking about that kind of project management, sort of formally being a management consultant, and seeing what goes on in some of the investment banks. No question there are some areas where things are a little lacking and they're not quite up to the standards of managing and going through those proper steps of planning and system testing and UAT and all that, all those good steps, the Six Sigma and everything else. But I think it's come a long way, and even where processes aren't perfect, they're a whole lot better. So not only do you have smart people with great ideas, but you now also have smart people that know how to take those ideas from the planning stage to implementation. So you're right. I think a lot of earlier software was just sort of slammed in and done as fast as it could be done because they needed to start trading, and they didn't want to lose the time. The time would cause them to lose potential revenues, so they would just get stuff in fast. But I think Wall Street's gotten smart and stepped back and learned that there are cases where you really need to plan, and it's going to work better for you in the long run.
And we've actually been involved in on Wall Street for about 12 or 13 years. First starting off in the front office, working directly with traders, and sort of prior to the real formalization of agile methodologies that sort of run somewhat orthogonally to some of the things like CMM and the Six Sigma efforts. And I think one of the interesting things about back office technology projects is because you have so many integration points and integration partners, you can't necessarily, it becomes more challenging to run those projects in an agile fashion, right? But the agile mantra is to really not bite off more than you can chew and expect change every course of the way. And so you deliver in small chunks or small increments, let's say on a monthly basis, and that helps reduce risk, and it helps you respond to the changes that just are inevitable in any business technology endeavor.
Question or comment?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to know essentially what makes you people not sleep at night. I want to give you a spectrum. there's this question that I pressed you with initially about what are the problems, and you said I book it. I write at 8 still, and I read it as a 6. And so there's that problem. Then there's the problem of I coded it wrong, and then there's the problem of the algorithm was developed wrong, and then there's the problem of the accepted algorithm in the industry just happens to blow up 1% of the time. So which one of these problems get you? Are you all thinking about, well, make sure that trader is typing the 8, or make sure that that trader is not messing up the spreadsheet, or do you get a chance to actually think down the line all the way to the end of the industry is calculating this wrong?
All right, so hang on one second. For the home audience again, so the question, I have these visions of people sitting, in their living rooms listening to the recordings, I have to say, as I do this. But I hope not. The question was, of all the many things that could go wrong, be it a simple typing error to something that was written wrong in the system that you've just deployed, to the whole industry just does it wrong and hasn't realized it, which are the scariest of all the things that you worry about?
I'll take a whack at that. I think that well, it's. Do I care about the industry having gotten it wrong? Yes, but I'm going to be driven by what they want to do. So if they've created the wrong pricing methodology, right? Everybody forgot about the volatility effect in Eurodollar futures, and a lot of people made a lot of money, and a lot of people got whacked. Okay, fine. So there's one where they got the algorithm wrong, right? That's for somebody to exploit, in my view. Okay, that's not a system problem. That's not a processing problem. That is an opportunity for somebody to get the rest of the market and get them right. Writing a number down wrong. We've fought this battle constantly.
There was certainly a view, and it exists in some markets today, that double entry is the way to go. Got to be double entry, or it's not going to work. And in fact, if it's not double entry, I don't want to hear about it. So we sit there and we go, well, that means some matching process. So you can do matching with our system, fine. But in almost every case where we've sat down with someone, we said, why don't you describe to us how this double entry process works? Well, what happens is there's a guy who does the trade, and he types it in. And then he hands a piece of paper to this guy, and he types it in. And then we compare, and we feel good about that. Why would we feel good about that? I don't know what that accomplished, except we found out whether he could actually type the thing that was in front of him. And I'm literally, you can go through, and these guys have elaborate, extensive things where they go through, and you literally go, you're just checking if he types well. Our system approaches it slightly different. I do the trade with you. I stick it in the system, and I send it to you. You have to then agree to it. We're working off the same record. The sooner another mantra within our firm, not only get it as close to the trade as you can, but get to a single record as soon as you can between the two firms. And you can reference that. And that will hopefully eliminate the 6 versus 8. I'll again give you an anecdotal story. I'm trading again, this was back at Citibank. But I'm trading at Citibank and trading, I think it was the cap book at the time. And executed a trade right before an unemployment number, the night before, right? And I'd done 400 million, 8% caps, whatever, I'd sold them. I go in the morning meeting, and I go, yesterday, John there, we did, 400 million with actually, he said it. He goes, we did 100 million with so-and-so. And I'm sitting there going, 100 million? I did 400 million. What happened? Well, he said to me, done for 100 million. So I said, as the meeting broke up, I said, guess who's going to sit with me as we go through this unemployment number, because we're open to 300 million, right? So there was a place. How would you resolve that? Well, we resolved it by basically everybody listening to the same thing at the same time. Okay, and I think that has to be your mantra. So what do I lie awake and worry about at night? That what we put out does what it says it does. No more. That's what we've got to do, and that's what our developers are operating with. What it says in the tin is what it does. Now, how do I make sure that I'm comfortable with that? We spend a lot of money on testing. I mean, we spend a lot of money. I think I've talked to other firms, and they're shocked by how many people we have dedicated to it, both on a manual basis and an automated basis. Extremely important to us. Our reputation can go down the tubes in a heartbeat, and it takes a long time to build it up. Therefore, we've got to spend money on making sure that what we say it does, it does.
But when it's easy to say, I calculate a portfolio return correct. It's easy to say that. But what does it mean? It does what it does. It's what you say it does. There's so many levels to get right. It's 30 steps to get right.
The other advantage that I have is that I don't just have one firm using it. I've got whatever we're up to, call it 1,000 users, all pounding away on it, and we will get responses back. Well, this didn't go the way we thought it would go. And frankly, what we generally find, and it's not in every case, but what we generally find is they might have implemented it wrong. And we help them through that implementation process. And maybe we described it wrong, and that's why they implemented it. I don't want to assign blame, but in general, we will have that problem. Now, we can go back, and I'll tell a tale on our firm anyway. Again, we had an equity calculation where the rounding was done wrong. I asked, did we test it? Yes, we tested it. But guess what? We didn't test the one that highlighted the problem. Okay? So that does exist. So what do? We go back and we say, okay, we'll take care of it and clean it all up for you, and what's the P&L impact? And luckily, it's nothing. But there will be those systems. But when you have more people pounding on it, those things bubble up very, very quickly. But you do have to spend a lot of time on testing. I mean, we spend an inordinate amount of time, frankly, from my perspective. It'd be easy to not do it, right? But you got that reputational risk on top of you. So I do lie awake at night every time, when we go through a new release. Is it good? Is it going to work? At
the end of the day, if you're counting on somebody else to tell you whether there's a problem, you're going to be up at night all the time. I mean, we used to ask when I was doing these kinds of projects, we used to ask, actually I still do occasionally, how are we going to know if it's wrong? What are the key things that have to be right, and how are we going to know if they're wrong? Confirms was always a key where you knew you were wrong. The customer looked at it, but we had lots of, this is in Tokyo, where confirms were sort of out of fashion at the time, so we didn't really do them with most of our customers. Don't like to get confirms from us, so we're not going to send them. Yeah, it was a crazy world. And so you needed other ways to know. I mean, obviously, if it's not a long dated trade, you have settlement. Well, geez, did we get the cash we expected? You should be able to look. But there are always ways to know whether things are wrong, and you have to know what those are up front. And if you're depending on the vendor, the consultant, or somebody else to tell you, then I personally, my own view is that's always going to cause you problems. You guys know your process better than anybody. You should know what can go wrong and how you'd know if it was wrong.
I think I'm often more concerned not with if the industry is doing what they're doing right, but with what they're not doing at all. So obviously we're spending a lot of time on processing, pricing CDS trades and interest rate swaps and the big stuff, the vanilla stuff, the equity swaps that happen all the time. But what about the exotic stuff that sort of happens in a vacuum and only like 3 people on the planet are smart enough to understand how the trades work? To me, that's where the worry is. We don't even know. A good place to throw out a completely useless statistic that I thought was funny was it's something like $400 trillion in notional, according to ISDA, for derivatives, which is more than the combined GDP of every country in the world. Right? That's a lot of leverage. And so, like we said before, even if at the highest expectations, like 60% of that maybe was confirmed electronically, that's a whole lot of money that's still managed through, faxed paper confirms. That's a little scary. So it's not his CHIPS platform, managing the interest rate swaps well. I think we can be pretty safe with that, but it's the stuff that we're not even talking about where the worry is. At least that's kind of how I look at it.
I had a couple more things on my list of questions, but is there anything else out there that you guys are dying to know? Yeah.
Like the skill gap from the front to the back, in your experience, given the complexity and the growth in those products, where reasonably, since obviously it's a cost center back office, where are you going to find people who can approximate and understand what you're labeling these strikingly incomprehensible transactions?
So great question. It was where are we finding the people, I think was the question, to man the back office that have the skill sets that we would need. And I'll add to that because it was on my list. Also, how great a differential is there today between front office and back office, and does the middle office help?
Yeah, it's a major problem, and in my consulting days, working in some major investment banks in that, it was like a sort of a hybrid IT operations area for OTC derivatives. They had a horrible time trying to find, sort of like mid-level management in the OTC derivative space, people that, like you said, truly understood these products, that, weren't wanting to trade them, people that wanted to work on the processing side. So. Yeah, it's a problem that I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how the industry or the headhunting firms can make operations look sexy to kids coming out of Ivy League business schools. But it's definitely a tough problem.
I think to the extent you automate things more and you move towards a process that deals with exceptions, you find that people are attracted to that. If I'm suddenly in a process where all I'm dealing with is the unusual, and I don't know what that is every day, that tends to be somewhat exciting to some people, or a lot of people, right? You want to be challenged every day in a reasonable way. You don't want to be challenged because, oh my God, my 65 guys that tick the boxes are not in today. I want to be challenged because suddenly there was an app trade, or suddenly there was a way I could improve that process. So I think the more you automate the mundane, which is really my job, right? I just go down and look for the biggest volumes, and I keep doing it until we hit the end, and hopefully we never will. The other, I think, is on the risk side, and I'll borrow it from Goldman Sachs, and certainly all the stories about them in the past year in terms of the money they made in mortgages, et cetera. That's not what I'd want to highlight. What I want to highlight is that the guys that now run a lot of their risk on the OTC were the guys that were my counterparts on trading desks around the firm before. And there's one guy there that I always identified, and I said, if you're ever going to start a business, that's the guy to get. Now they've got him in the risk management role. Now, why is he excited in that risk management role? Because it's been elevated. Why am I in this OTC business? I used to run a trading desk. Why am I doing this? Well, I'm excited about running a business that's from scratch, right? That's why I went to Goldman Sachs in the beginning. So I think there are people that will get excited about it. It's not easy.
But I think as long as you create the job the right way, I think you will get people that are of a certain quality. And obviously, I guess the other one is always money.
That's what I was going to say. They're in such high demand that
Right.
in my times in that one role, how many people I saw leave for competitors because the high demand and they follow the money.
Well, I find it curious that in like on the front end of the process that it's so scientific that there wouldn't be some value to doing a cost analysis to figure out what your per trade save would be, the economic benefit, because just based on the growth patterns, I mean, to your point, you can always throw bodies, consultants to do the cleanup, but you're not really benefiting your business. I mean, at some point it just makes dollars and cents to do it. Like somebody, like I would think, you'd be able to have some forensic around where the top 3 reasons that converse trades still don't make sense 6 months, a year later. Why that wouldn't be just knowledge that people in the industry would really be able to kind of say, yeah.
Sounds like a consulting practice about to be born.
No, but I mean, it seems like it seems that you're going to get the same foregone conclusion. Yes, we have problems. Yes, obviously,
So my sense of how this works, because I think you're absolutely right, but I think it goes through a cycle of we're making lots of money, we should invest in the people in the back office because this would really benefit the firm and it would be great. Let's invest money in training and just pay higher salaries to the back office, and that goes well for a while until that product, that desk, or that firm starts to suffer losses, and the first thing they do is they cut the staff in the back office. And because they haven't finished all their automation projects because half of them have failed, they then have lots of people running around after trades they can't possibly manage, and then they hire in a bunch of low-paid people because they can't afford the right people, and they throw them in there with the back office people that were smart. The back office people that were smart then get demoralized by the fact that they're working with people that have half their skills and they're not getting their bonuses, and they quit.
Let's make sure we don't end on this.
We won't. We won't. But I think that's it's not that we don't think it's a good idea. It just seems to go through this never-ending cycle of we've solved it once and then it's not solved anymore. And I don't know whether it's just a matter of reminding ourselves to solve it again, or if you guys have a solution. I just haven't seen how do you get out of that cycle.
Well, and this is also arguably the first sort of generation of people working in this world and this landscape with this level of automation and with the markets being so IT heavy. So now we're just starting to see people that have 15 years experience, processing interest rate swap transactions. 15 years ago, those people didn't exist because they weren't, the market just wasn't really what it is. So, so now we'll start to see that where people have that kind of experience and they do exist in the marketplace, and they'll recruit people they know and past colleagues and, people that they went to college with or whatever the case may be. So maybe the second generation, the first generation will encourage the second generation to see that this is exciting and interesting work. And, especially from I come from a technology background. If you look at it from a pure technology point of view, there is some really, really cool technology that needs to get implemented to make this stuff work. And that's a great challenge for any, computer science graduate who wants to get to play with some of the latest and greatest stuff.
Plus, it's less risky for those same IT people to get involved in the middle or back office because you don't have that volatility of front office IT. Because you get a lot of the hot shots out of school that want to get right onto the desk, and they want to be quants, and they want to be the next star trader, applying what they learned in computer science class to some interesting problems out there. But at the same time, you have the tried and true technologists that sort of stay the course, and those are the folks that see that there are huge opportunities to, A, get exposure to an interesting OTC landscape out there through the back office, and yet make an impact with technology, with the skills that they already have in terms of implementing systems. I think that at the end of the day, this is a systems problem, right? And the organization of how you apply the technology to solve those system problems. Right, and at the end of the day, the further end of the day, the people solving those is a people problem, and in terms of how you organize your teams and how you structure your projects to solve, the particular problems at hand. And those are just exciting problems for technologists that want to remain, close to the technology.
Plus, your business users in the back office tend to be a little bit easier to work with, maybe, than the front office.
Yeah, they don't throw phones as often.
Yeah. So that might be a positive.
All right, one last question.
In a world where you have limited amounts of resources and time, do you have any thoughts in terms of how you can allocate resources to some sort of dichotomy, such as you've spent a lot of time talking about situations in which there are mistakes or errors, but it doesn't seem, the feeling I'm getting is most of these they're not malicious mistakes. They're built into the process, they're oversights, they're whatever else. I would differentiate that from the situation, let's say, at SocGen, where you have a malicious attempt to undermine the system. Now, how do you allocate your resources?
Okay.
To try to guard against both, and where should the priorities be?
So the question was, how do you attack both sort of the inadvertent error and the malicious error with scarce resources? How would you allocate time, money to attack the two different sides of the coin? I know Chip's going to say you can't do anything about the rogue trader because he already said it.
I think it is true that if there's somebody who really wants to do it, you're going to have a tough time. But I would argue the following, that if you actually don't have the resources to tackle both of those problems, you probably shouldn't be in that business. Because otherwise the downside is too great. And if you think, well, okay, I'll just take care of the numerical problems and the stupid errors, and I'll just assume everything else and everybody else will do the right thing, I'd argue you have to get out of the business because the risk is too great. Because then you are going to be up all night, every night, going, oh my God, is Johnny, is he doing the right thing? So I'd say get out of the business. That'd be my recommendation. I mean, you got to spend it on both.
This is pretty arguable, but I would say, one, the rogue trader, the malicious stuff is a compliance problem, where the sort of fat finger errors or buys instead of sells is an IT problem. And that's very arguable, and I could probably argue it the opposite way too. But like you said, no matter how sophisticated IT is to prevent malicious stuff, someone will figure out how to get around it and do it anyway. So that's why I say it's a compliance problem. The fat finger errors, usability, better user interfaces, better process management, that stuff can continually be improved, and a lot of the document creation systems sort of learn now as they go. They understand how certain clients like things, and how documents should be structured based on who the counterparty is. So I think the IT will continue to improve to, fat finger errors used to be, we had doing cash equities, they had a touch screen, right, so they could punch in their orders. So it was pretty easy to slip, just like using an ATM. It was pretty easy to slip and add an extra zero, or do 2 million instead of 1 million. But a lot of those things have been improved. The touchscreen technology is improved, and people don't use touchscreens that much anymore for that. But anyway, so yeah, I think one's compliance and one's IT.
Are they necessarily a solution to one? Does that necessarily help a solution to the other? I can see an argument saying that if you throw a lot of bodies at it, it decreases the chance of somebody slipping through a hole in the IT system.
Well, the whole nature of rogue trades, right, is that they can squeeze through, and they, the nature of the rogue trader is that he knows how to subvert the system.
That's right. I would sort of argue that if you had a lot of individuals, it's harder potentially to get through this.
Well, the thing is, the back office isn't necessarily looking for those types of problems, right? And we had this when we were preparing for this panel, we had this discussion on whether or not rogue trading and the monitoring for such is a middle office or a back office problem. And I think one of the interesting things, right, is that clearly if there is a particular concentration to a trader or a counterparty or a product or something that just a threshold has been exceeded, it's more of a limits monitoring or a concentration monitoring problem in the middle office, and that can be solved with technology if you monitor it appropriately, assuming that your trades are flowing through, that all of your trades are flowing through your middle office processes. And I think that's not always the case. You always have those few exotic deals where valuations and the measurement and identification of risk is something that's done offline, and there are more opportunities that exist there to push trades through that shouldn't be.
All right. Thanks, guys, very much. I'm going to take a few minutes and try and hit some of the highlights for those of you that didn't get the notes the first time. So just to recap what was active discussion with, I'm glad to see a lot of audience participation, which is what makes them so interesting. We had asked the panelists to come and say what was your number one piece of advice for the industry on how to deal with challenges in derivatives back office. And we heard from John, focus on what and how you build what you're building so that you put the pieces together intelligently. We heard from Chip, get on with it, I think was the famous quote. Just do it. Get some automation in and stop trying to make it all perfect. I'm paraphrasing Chip, but I think that's pretty close. Kevin said, find some cool IT and be proactive and get something in. I think a similar theme, that waiting on automation is not probably the best idea. In terms of the issues that exist today and why we haven't seen more progress, I heard a lot of talk about still a distance between front office and back office, and that distance in some firms is getting greater instead of lesser. And sort of what was implied by that, although Chip didn't actually say it, was that the middle office isn't doing a good enough job bridging that gap. If the front office and the back office get too far, we tend to end up with a chasm. The benefits of moving, however, were to get your afternoons back and find a way to spend less time arguing about what the trade should be and more time doing the trades. I heard a lot of talk of tools, particularly about not having the one-stop shop, and that being one of the major challenges we still have, despite all the investment, despite all the vendors, despite all the innovation, that we have an industry that's still really cobbling together lots of pieces and parts to make the process as controlled as it should be, to deal with the front office innovation. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, no optimism that Excel is going to go away anytime soon. And in fact, to the question, well, can we at least standardize what Excel does and automate it? I think the answer was, depending on the product, depending on the process, you have some hope, but essentially you better get some auditing tools in for your Excel spreadsheets because they're not going away. In terms of whether there was systemic risk caused by these issues, I was hoping you guys would debate that a little bit more. I think the answer I heard was basically no. That first of all, it was no with a caveat. No, we don't think so today, and we haven't seen anything that indicates it. But also, there's a lot of stuff we really don't know about what's going on out there, and maybe it's out there. Ultimately, the answer was it almost doesn't matter, because the answer or the reason that one would fix this problem, which we had lots of good advice on how to do, was not because of systemic risk, which might cause the regulators to be mad at us, but was because the cost per trade, if we really knew what it was and we really measured it, was high enough that it just made good business sense to invest in more back office automation and better controls on the process. There were a lot of great questions from the audience about the Excel issue and the ability to get rid of it, passive monitoring maybe being an option for at least monitoring what we can't stop. I heard FPML is a possibility for how we get stuff out of spreadsheets as well, automating the data out of the back of the spreadsheet if you can't get rid of it. We had questions about IT projects and the fact that some of them fail so spectacularly. Is that a good reason to just not do them, or to really limit what we do? A resounding no from the panel. I saw a lot of nodding when that question was asked. So I think there's some folks in the audience that would happily not do their big IT projects. Personally, I think no pain, no gain, and there's probably some good reasons to invest in technology, and that there'll be some short-term issues in technology rollouts, especially ones that are in high volatility, high profit areas of the bank or the trading floor. We had questions about back office, front office, and the dichotomy in skill sets and how we keep good people in the back office. It seemed like a general acceptance that was important, both to deal with this particular problem and in general to deal with flexibility and the ability to move forward in the front office. And the advice there was Automate, again, see, this is why we do the technology forum, so we can say you should automate everything. Automate as much as you can, move to an exception managed type of process, make the job more interesting to the back office staff. There was some talk about maybe promoting out of the back office, getting those people into risk management or other functions to make their jobs more interesting. And you could always pay them more, apparently seems to be a good idea. I'd be up for that. And then I think at the end of the day, the summary, I guess, again, vastly paraphrasing, seems to be that the issue certainly hasn't gone away. I didn't even hear any optimism it was going to go away anytime soon, but we're looking towards better technology solutions that bring the pieces together a little bit better. We're looking towards maybe smarter applications in the back office and better people management. So at the end of the day, and I think this is how it comes down in all of our technology sessions, it's only a little bit about the technology. The technology is sort of the start, and then lots of process issues that have to be solved, and some people issues. It's the three-legged stool back, people, process, technology. But I heard a resounding, if you don't have the technology at least in there and you're not clear on what you're doing, the other two by themselves won't solve the problem either. So hopefully that's what all of you heard. Otherwise, I just made up a spectacular story about the last hour and a half. I appreciate your attention and all your good questions. And I'm going to turn it back over to David for logistics. No? Or should I just welcome everybody to cocktails?
Thank Debbie and the panelists, and also ask everyone to join us right upstairs, come outside, up the escalator. We have a wine and cheese reception starting right now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.